Chapter 1, The Temptation of Knowledge. Have you ever been hugged so tight, your bones snapped? Engineer Volkov merely touched the black stone, and a dead civilization instantly calcified his flesh, burrowing into his brain for a single drop of warmth. But here's the horror, this is not an attack. It's their sick, twisted way of begging for help. And now, to stop the nightmare, a young empath must do the unthinkable, voluntarily let these parasites inside. The transition from hyperspace always felt like dying. Sydney pressed her palms flat against the bridge's warm membrane walls, willing her stomach to settle. Around her, the bioluminescent moss dimmed from the violent strobe of FTL travel to its normal turquoise glow. The shift should have been soothing, like surfacing from deep water into sunlight. Instead, the explorer shuddered beneath her hands, and Sydney's breath caught in her throat. Something was wrong. The ship's anxiety hit her in waves, phantom hunger gnawing at her belly, a cold dread creeping up her spine. Sydney closed her eyes and listened with senses no one else on the crew possessed. Through the neural bridge connecting her consciousness to the vessel's vast biomass, she felt the explorer's revulsion as its external sensors swept across Nexus Prima. "Easy," she whispered, stroking the wall in slow circles. The gesture was instinctive, half comfort, half communication. "I'm here. We okay?" The ship did not believe her. Behind Sydney, Captain Vance's voice cut through the bridge's humid air. "Orbital insertion in 30 seconds. Dar. Chang, what's our initial read?" Lena Chang leaned over the hollow table, her usually perfect posture bent with concentration. The jasmine tea scent she always carried mixed with the ozone smell of active instruments. Planetary mass consistent with pre-landing estimates. Atmosphere is thin but breathable. Thermal signature is odd. Define odd. Vance's gray-blue eyes never left the viewport, where the planet rotated into view. Sydney opened her eyes and immediately wished she had not. Nexus Prima hung against the black like a bruise, all ashen grays and mottled blacks under the anemic light of a dying red sun. No clouds. No oceans. No sign of the green-blue vitality every other world in the Horizon Core database displayed. The planet looked desiccated, mummified, a corpse cooling in the void. The explorer recoiled. Sydney gasped, her fingers digging into the wall's yielding surface. The ship's terror flooded through her neural link, primal, wordless, absolute. It was the same instinctive horror a living thing felt when confronted with its own death. The planet below radiated entropy, and the explorer's biological system screamed in recognition of their own eventual fate. "Sid." Her father's voice, thin and worried. "Dar." Elijah Graves had moved from his station near the geology console, his perpetually disheveled hair catching the blue light. "What's happening?" "The ship," Sydney's voice cracked. She had to swallow twice before continuing. "It's scared, Dad. The planet, it feels like a grave." Vance turned in his pilot's chair. The organic throne held him in its embrace, fine filaments connecting his spine to the ship's nervous system. Sydney saw his jaw tighten, felt the pulse of concern. He pushed through the link. The captain experienced the ship's moods too, but not with her raw immediacy. His connection was about control. Hers was about communion. "Can you calm it?" Vance asked. Sydney nodded, though she was not sure. She closed her eyes again and sent waves of reassurance through the bond, images of previous landings, memories of successful missions, the warmth of her pack's presence on the bridge. Slowly, reluctantly, the explorer's panic subsided to a low, rumbling unease. "Good," Vance said. "Chang, continue your report." Chang's elegant fingers danced across the hollow table's interface, calling up layers of spectral analysis. "The thermal signature is wrong for a dead world. There's residual heat, but not from volcanic activity. The distribution is too regular, too artificial, Graves interrupted. He moved to stand beside Chang, his thick glasses reflecting the holographic display. Sydney watched her father's eyes widen behind the lenses, the expression he got when something fascinating and terrible revealed itself. Lena, zoom to Sector 7 Alpha. Grid coordinates. The image sharpened. Sydney left her place by the wall and joined them at the table. What she saw made no sense at first. Her brain tried to interpret the landscape as natural basalt formations, maybe ancient lava flows. But the patterns were too perfect. Thousands of black obelisks rose from the planet's surface in precise geometric arrays, each one identical in height and width, spaced at exact intervals. It's a circuit board, Sydney breathed. Or a graveyard, her father said softly. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted the magnification. Look at the material composition. Spectral analysis shows a crystalline lattice structure embedded with what appears to be organic compounds. No, wait. Not organic. Techno-organic. A hybrid matrix. Chang's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing naked wonder. These are not monuments. They read data storage. Servers. Impossible. But Graves' voice carried no conviction. He was already pulling up chemical breakdowns, running computational models. Sydney watched the numbers cascade across his screen, meaningless to her but clearly profound to him. Lena, if this is what I think it is, looking at an intact archive. The entire history of a civilization, preserved in crystalline stasis. How intact? Vance's question was sharp, strategic. The captain's mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating risks and resources. Unknown. But Captain. Graves turned from the display, his thin face flushed with excitement. These structures are still generating heat. After millions of years of planetary death, they still powered. Whatever technology the ancients developed, it does not degrade. It does not deplete. It's perpetual motion. The new voice was a bass rumble from the engineering station. Dmitry Volkov had been silent until now, but Sydney saw the dangerous gleam in his eyes. The engineer's thick fingers flew across his console, pulling thermal imaging to his screen. Cap, forget the archaeology. Look at the energy readings. 0 thermal loss. Perfect efficiency. The ancients solved the fundamental problem, they cracked sustained power generation without fuel consumption. Sydney felt the shift in the room's atmosphere. Volkov's obsession was a physical thing, hungry and sharp. It reminded her of the way the explorer felt when its biological systems needed nutrients, a gnawing, insistent drive. Dmitri, Vance's tone carried warning. Do you understand what this means? Volkov stood, his massive frame making the humid bridge feel smaller. The explorer is always hungry, Cap. Always. We burn through power faster than we can synthesize it because we running a living organism on dead batteries. But down there, he jabbed a finger at the rotating planet. Down there is the answer. The technology to sustain biological life indefinitely. We never need to ration energy again. Never need to sleep the ship through long transits. Never need to, here to observe, Vance interrupted. His voice was quiet, but Sydney felt the spike of authority through the neural link, a reminder to the entire crew of the chain of command. The pact protocols are clear. We document. We study. We do not interfere with ancient sites. Volkov's jaw worked, but he said nothing. Sydney watched the engineer return to his station, his movements stiff with frustration. Her father broke the tension. Captain, I recommend a surface expedition. Limited team, passive scanning only. If we can confirm these are functioning data archives, the implications for xenoarchaeology alone would justify, approved. Vance was already pulling mission parameters from the ship's database. But we follow strict safety protocols. No active interference. No hardline connections. No pinging their systems. We look, we scan, we leave. Understood. Chang, you have the bridge. Volkov, Graves, suit up. We wheels down in 20 minutes. Sydney felt her stomach drop. Captain, wait, Vance turned to her, and she saw the faint softness behind his tactical mask. What is it, Sydney? How could she explain? The Explorer's fear had subsided to background static, but something else prickled at the edge of her awareness. A whisper. A pull. The planet was not just dead, it was hungry in a way she could not articulate. Hungry the way the Explorer was hungry, but colder. Vaster. Wrong. Be careful, she finally said. Please. Her father crossed to her and wrapped one thin arm around her shoulders. Always am, Sid. Besides, someone has to survive to write the paper on this discovery. His smile was reassuring, but Sydney saw the tremor in his hands as he released her. Elijah Graves was terrified and fascinated in equal measure, the state he lived in most of the time. Sydney watched the three men disappear into the corridor toward the equipment lockers. The bridge felt emptier without them, the soft pulse of bioluminescence suddenly too quiet. Chang settled into the captain's chair without ceremony, grimacing slightly as the neural filaments extended from the backrest. Feels like cold needles, she muttered. You get used to it, Sydney lied. The next 20 minutes crawled past. Sydney tried to focus on routine tasks, calibrating sensors, monitoring the ship's nutritional intake, soothing the occasional spasm in the wall membranes. But her attention kept drifting to the viewport, to the dead world rotating below, to the perfect grid of black spires reaching toward the void. Dropship away, Chang announced. Surface landing in 90 seconds. Sydney pressed her palm against the nearest wall, feeling the Explorer's heartbeat through the biomass. The ship's anxiety had returned, sharper now. It sensed its captain leaving, descending to the surface of the corpse world, and the vessel's protective instincts flared. Sydney sent waves of calm, but her own nerves betrayed her. The dropship was a bright dot on her console screen, descending through Nexus Prima's thin atmosphere. She watched the altitude numbers tick down, 10,000 meters, 5,000, 1,000, touchdown. Surface team, confirm status, Chang said into the comm. A burst of static, then Vance's voice, confirmed. Sealed and secure. Beginning approach to nearest spire structure. Copy. The Explorer will maintain high orbit and continuous monitoring. Report every 15 minutes. Acknowledged. Surface team out. The channel went quiet. Sydney moved back to her place by the wall, needing the physical contact with the ship. Through the neural bridge, she could feel the Explorer tracking the away team, not with sensors, but with something deeper. The ship recognized its pack members by their electromagnetic signatures, the unique rhythm of their hearts. 3 small pulses of life on a dead world, growing smaller as they moved away from the dropship. They'll be fine, Chang said without looking up from her displays. The captain does not take unnecessary risks. Sydney wanted to believe her. She stroked the wall, sending comfort she did not feel through the bond. The Explorer's bioluminescence flickered, Morse code anxiety in turquoise light. 15 minutes passed. 20. The comm remained silent. Surface team, status report, Chang said, an edge creeping into her usually measured voice. Static. Surface team, respond. More static. Then Graves' voice, tight with scientific awe, Chang, we, at the base of the primary spire. Dar. Graves reporting. The structure is, it's not rock. The surface is covered in some kind of liquid medium. Like mercury, but darker. It's reacting to our body heat. Pulsing. Volkov, confirm your distance from the structure. Chang's fingers gripped the chair arms. 20 meters, the engineer's voice crackled back. Running passive thermal scans now. Chang, the heat signature is stronger up close. Whatever's powering these things is directly beneath the surface layer. If I could access the negative, Vance cut in. No contact. Volkov, maintain safe distance. A long pause. Then, copy, Captain. Sydney did not like the hesitation in Volkov's tone. She pressed her palm harder against the wall, trying to extend her senses through the ship's awareness. The explorer tracked its pack members by their electromagnetic signatures, 3 faint pulses on the dead world below. Minutes crawled past. Chang monitored the telemetry feeds. Sydney watched the bio-signs on her console, Vance steady, Graves elevated but stable, Volkov, surface team, report. Chang's voice was tighter now. Volkov's response came through broken static. Captain, I'm running a quick diagnostic. The interface protocol is standard. I can tap in without triggering, negative. Vance's command was sharp. Volkov, step back from the structure. Now. Cap, it's safe. I'm just going to, the comm erupted with a wet, tearing sound. Volkov. Graves' scream was high-pitched, terrified. Alex, it's got him. The spire, it grabbed his arm. Sydney's console lit up red. Volkov's biosign spiked, heart rate at 180 and climbing, neural activity redlining into critical. She watched the numbers scroll past in disbelief. His brain activity was at 400%. Impossible. Fatal. Chang, he's seizing. Sydney's voice cracked. His mind is, the explorer shuddered. Sydney gasped as the ship's terror crashed into her consciousness. Through the neural bond, she felt the vessel's awareness lock onto Volkov's electromagnetic signature, and recoil in horror. Something was flooding into the engineer's mind. Terabytes of data. No, not data. Memories. Emotions. Billions of voices screaming in unison, drowning him in their collective desperation. They're not alone, Sydney whispered. Her veins began to glow beneath her skin, pulsing blue in rhythm with the ship's panicked heartbeat. Something down there, something's been waiting. Through the bond, she felt Volkov's agony. Saw through the ship's senses as the engineer convulsed, his arm encased in black stone, his helmet display strobing with incomprehensible symbols. And behind it all, pressing down with the weight of geological time, ancient consciousnesses clung to him like drowning swimmers dragging down their rescuer. Graves, get clear. Vance's voice over the comm. I'm going to pulse the lock. Overload the connection. Captain, no. Sydney tried to stand, tried to reach the comm panel. Do not use the neural link. Do not, too late. On her console, she watched Vance's biosign spike. The captain was channeling an electromagnetic pulse through his neural interface, the same interface connected directly to the explorer's nervous system. Sydney felt the surge of energy race down from orbit, through the ship's awareness, through Vance's connection, toward the trapped engineer. For one heartbeat, she thought it might work. Then the ancient system struck back. The pulse hit the spire, and something vast woke up. Through the bond, Sydney felt it trace the energy signature backward, following the thread of Vance's neural link like a predator tracking scent. The consciousness storm drowning Volkov suddenly shifted, recognizing something far larger standing behind the captain. The explorer. A massive biological brain. Warm. Alive. Accessible. No. Sydney screamed. The feedback loop closed with the violence of a lightning strike. On her console, Vance's biosigns exploded, neural activity white-hot for 3 seconds, then flatlined completely. Volkov's readings crashed simultaneously. Both men went dark. The explorer convulsed. Sydney was thrown to the deck as the ship bucked beneath her. The bridge's bioluminescence strobed from turquoise to crimson. Alarms shrieked. The walls began weeping thick gray mucus, the ship's immune response to invasion. Through the bond, Sydney felt the vessel's systems fighting something forcing its way inside, using Vance's open neural channel as a gateway. Code red. Chang abandoned the captain's chair, the neural filaments ripping free from her spine. All hands, medical emergency. 2 casualties on the surface. But Sydney could not move. She lay on the warm deck, her body arcing as the ship's agony became hers. The explorer's heartbeat shattered into arrhythmia, thump 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 pause thump. The vessel was being infected through its own captain, and it screamed in biological panic. Through the chaos, Sydney's consciousness fragmented. Part of her remained on the bridge, feeling the humid air turn cold as life support faltered. But another part, the part connected to the ship, was dragged down into the data stream flooding through Vance's compromised link. She saw them. Billions of consciousness fragments, trapped in crystalline prisons for geological ages. They were not attacking. They were desperate. Starving. They'd been alone in absolute sensory deprivation for 1,000,000 years, and when Volkov touched the spire, they felt warmth for the first time since their world died. They clung to him with the mindless panic of drowning creatures. And when Vance tried to save his engineer, they found the bridge to something even warmer. Even more alive. The ship. Her ship. Sydney tried to scream a warning, but her voice was lost in the torrent. She watched helplessly as the ancient consciousnesses flooded through Vance's neural pathways, seeking the vast biological warmth of the explorer. The captain's mind was collapsing under the weight, his consciousness dissolving into static as billions of voices tried to speak through him simultaneously. On the surface of Nexus Prima, both men lay motionless on the black sand. Volkov remained anchored to the spire, his arm encased in stone. Vance had collapsed beside him, neural interface smoking, both of them trapped in a coma so deep their biometric readings barely registered as alive. Sydney felt it all through the ship's senses. Felt Graves' frantic attempts to revive them. Felt the explorer's desperate attempts to sever the connection. Felt the ancient consciousnesses spreading through the vessel's neural pathways like a virus, seeking warmth, seeking life, seeking escape from their frozen prison. The last thing Sydney saw before darkness claimed her was her father on his knees in the black sand, screaming into his helmet comm for help no one could send. Then the explorer's heartbeat stopped. And started again. Wrong. The rhythm was alien now, thump thump pause, synchronizing with something vast and cold beneath the planet's surface. The ship's bioluminescence pulsed crimson. The walls wept. And deep in the heart chamber 12 decks below, the crystalline core began to scream in a frequency no human should be able to hear. Sydney's consciousness slipped away, dragged under by the weight of 1 billion drowning minds. The bridge fell into crimson darkness. And on the surface of Nexus Prima, the spires began to pulse with new hunger. Chapter 2, Immune Response. Sydney woke to screaming. Not human screaming, worse. The explorer shrieked through every bulkhead, every membrane, every pulsing artery in its vast biomass. The sound bypassed her ears entirely, drilling straight into her skull through the neural bridge. Sydney's eyes snapped open to crimson chaos. The bridge had transformed into a fever dream. Bioluminescent moss strobed violent red, casting shadows slicing across the deck in harsh, irregular pulses. The walls wept thick mucus, gray and viscous, dripping from the ceiling in heavy ropes. The air tasted wrong, chemical and hot, burning Sydney's throat with each breath. Containment breach in sectors 4 through 7, neural activity spiking, both subjects critical, ship's core temperature rising, I repeat, rising, voices crashed over each other, fragments of panic Sydney's brain struggled to parse. She pushed herself upright, her palms sliding in the slick coating now covering the deck. Her veins still glowed blue beneath her skin, pulsing arrhythmically. Through the bond, she felt the explorer's agony, a living thing being poisoned from within, thrashing against an invader it could not expel. Sydney. Chang's voice cut through the chaos. The XO stood at the hollow table, one hand braced against its surface, the other flying across tactical displays. Her perfect hair had come loose, dark strands plastered to her forehead with sweat. Are you injured? The ship, Sydney's voice cracked. It's dying. We re-aware. Chang's tone was clipped, professional, but Sydney caught the tremor beneath. The XO turned to address the bridge crew with surgical precision. Listen up. I'm assuming command per emergency protocols. Nav, lock down external control, I want manual override only. Comms, open a priority channel to DR. Graves on the surface. Tactical, she fixed her gaze on Ren Kim at the weapons console. Give me a threat assessment. Now. Kim's fingers danced across his interface, the geologist's stocky frame bent over readout scrolling too fast for Sydney to follow. His voice was hard, certain. XO, we re-looking at a hostile intrusion. The signal from the spire is rewriting our neural protocols. See here, he gestured at a cascading data stream. The pattern matches a distributed denial of service attack. Classic viral architecture. It's using the captain and Volkov as amplifiers, broadcasting directly into the ship's consciousness. Sydney pushed herself to her feet, swaying. The deck bucked beneath her, not ship movement, but the explorer convulsing. Through the viewport, Nexus Prima rotated serenely, indifferent to their crisis. Viral? Chang moved to Kim's station, her jasmine tea scent overwhelmed by the acrid smell of the ship's immune response. You saying this is an attack? Affirmative. Kim pulled up a medical overlay. Sydney saw her father's and Volkov's biometric data, both men's neural activity blazing white-hot, their brain patterns fragmenting under impossible load. The ancient system detected a larger target through Vance's link. Now it's attempting an upload. If it succeeds, it'll overwrite the Explorer's personality core. We'll be flying a corpse. The ship shuddered violently. Sydney grabbed the nearest console to stay upright. Around her, the bridge's organic architecture was failing. The walls had turned from healthy pink to diseased gray. Where bioluminescent veins should have pulsed with steady light, Sydney saw erratic flickers, synapses misfiring, systems crashing. Through the bond, she felt the Explorer's terror. The vessel perceived itself as infected, contaminated by something alien forcing its way through Vance's compromised neural channel. The ship's immune system had activated with blind, animal panic. Time frame? Chang's question was sharp. Kim ran calculations, his scarred hands steady despite the chaos. 15 minutes. Maybe less. After the core suffers irreversible neural necrosis, life support fails. We'll suffocate before we freeze. Options. 1. Kim turned to face Chang directly, and Sydney saw no hesitation in his expression. Orbital strike. Plasma batteries, full yield, targeted at Alpha Spire. Sever the connection at the source. The words landed like physical blows. Sydney's breath stopped. That kills them, Chang said softly. Vance and Volkov are still physically connected to the spire. They're at ground zero. I'm aware. Kim's voice carried no apology. But it saves the ship. Saves the crew. Saves you, XO. We're talking 37 lives against 2. The math is brutal, but it's clear. Sydney found her voice. No. UCA not, Sydney, sit down. Chang did not raise her voice, but authority resonated through every syllable. This is a command decision. You do not understand. Sydney moved toward the hollow table, her glowing veins casting blue light across the crimson-lit bridge. It's not an attack. The ship is panicking, but the signal is not hostile. They've not enough. Kim's bass rumble cut her off. Sid, I respect your connection to this vessel. But you 15 years old and you traumatized. Let the adults handle tactical. Fury and desperation warred in Sydney's chest. She turned to Chang, pleading. Give my dad a chance. He's down there. He can get them out physically. Please. Chang held Sydney's gaze for 3 long seconds. Then, comms, connect me to Dr. Graves. Static crackled, followed by her father's voice, thin, breathless, terrified. Chang, I'm at the spire. Both men are unconscious. Volkov's arm is encased in some kind of crystalline stone. ICA not, I need cutting equipment. Graves, listen carefully. Chang's tone gentled slightly. The ship is failing. Kim projects total neural collapse in 14 minutes. Can you extract them in time? A pause. Sydney heard her father's ragged breathing over the comm. I do not know, he finally said. But I have to try. There's an industrial laser cutter in the shuttle's emergency kit. If I can amputate Volkov's arm, understood. You have 5 minutes. After the, Chang's voice wavered, recovered. After the 5 minutes, I'm authorizing Kim to fire. Graves, if you CA not free them, get clear. That's an order. Copy. The channel went silent. Sydney watched through the ship's external sensors as her father sprinted across the black sand toward the distant shuttle. His suit's emergency beacon pulsed red against the dead landscape, a single point of frantic life on a world of stone. 5 minutes. The explorer convulsed again, more violently. The temperature spiked, Sydney's clothes were soaked with sweat, clinging to her skin. Around the bridge, crew members stumbled as gravity flickered. A technician near the engineering console cried out as the floor's heat burned through his boots. Kim, charge the main batteries. Chang's words were mechanical, drained of emotion. Target Alpha Spire. Stand by for firing solution. Charging. Kim's fingers moved across the weapon's interface. Batteries at 40%. 60. 80. Through the bond, Sydney felt the explorer recognize the threat. The ship's weapons were designed to fire outward, away from the vessel. But preparing them required routing massive power through the heart chamber, through the crystalline core currently screaming in sympathetic agony with the ancient consciousnesses flooding through Vance's link. Do not do this, Sydney projected through the neural bridge. They've not enemies. They've drowning. They've the ship did not understand. The explorer was a biological organism operating on instinct, and its instinct screamed contamination, invasion, death. Batteries at 100%, Kim announced. Firing solution locked. Awaiting your order, XO. Chang stood at the hollow table, both hands braced against its warm surface. Sydney saw her knuckles white with pressure. Graves, status. The comm crackled. I'm at Volkov's position. Setting up the cutter now. Stand by. Sydney heard the whine of the laser powering up, saw through the external sensors as her father positioned the cutting beam at Volkov's shoulder joint. The cutter's blue light reflected off the spire's black surface, off her father's helmet visor, off the stone-like substance encasing the engineer's arm. Cutting now, Graves reported. The laser touched the crystallized material. And the spire responded. Sydney screamed as feedback exploded through the bond. The ancient system detected aggression, a threat to its newly acquired resources, and reacted with automatic defense protocols. Through the ship's sensors, she watched an energy field snap into existence around both fallen men. Translucent, shimmering, impenetrable. The laser beam scattered against it harmlessly. No effect. Graves' voice was desperate. Chang, the cutter is not penetrating. There's some kind of shield. An energy pulse erupted from the spire. Sydney watched her father fly backward, tumbling across the sand, arms windmilling. His suit's telemetry spiked, breach alerts, oxygen warnings, power failure. He landed hard, rolled, lay still for 3 terrible seconds before pushing himself up on shaking arms. Dad! Sydney lunged for the comm panel. I'm okay. Graves' voice was ragged. But the shield, Chang, ICA not reach them. Physical rescue is impossible. The words hung in the crimson air. Chang closed her eyes. Opened them. Graves, return to the shuttle immediately. Kim, her voice broke, steadied. Prepare to fire. 5 minutes. No. Sydney moved toward Chang, her hands raised. You're wrong about what's happening. The rhythm, the spire's pulse and the ship's heartbeat, they're re-synchronizing, not fighting. This is not infection, it's communication. Kim's voice dripped skepticism. Sid, I've run the analysis. The data pattern is viral architecture. Classic distributed attack. Your emotional connection to this ship is clouding your judgment. I'm not emotional, I'm connected. Sydney's veins flared brighter, blue light pulsing in time with the Explorer's corrupted heartbeat. You're seeing symptoms and calling it disease. But the ship is panicking because it does not understand. They're not hacking us, they're knocking. What they need is irrelevant. Chang's words were final. My responsibility is to this crew and this vessel. Sydney, I'm sorry. But ICA not risk 37 lives on a guess. Through the bond, Sydney felt the Explorer's fever intensifying. The ship was cooking itself alive, throwing every defense against an enemy it could not physically fight. The walls wept mucus, the air turned caustic, gravity destabilized. Around the bridge, crew members coughed, struggled to breathe, fought to stay conscious in the thickening atmosphere. 4 minutes. Sydney's mind raced. She could not convince them. Kim's logic was too clean, too compelling. Chang was making the decision any good commander would make, save the many, sacrifice the few. On paper, it was the right call. But paper did not account for what Sydney felt through the neural bridge. The ancient consciousnesses flooding through Vance's link were not attacking. They were desperate. Starving. Sydney sensed their loneliness like a physical weight, a million years of absolute sensory deprivation, trapped in crystalline prisons, waiting for death. And when Volkov touched the spire, they felt warmth for the first time since their son died. They clung to him. To Vance. To the ship. Not as invaders, but as drowning swimmers grasping for driftwood. If Kim's strike destroyed the spire, it would kill more people dying. It would slaughter billions of consciousness fragments who committed no crime except wanting to survive. Sydney made her decision. I need to use the bathroom, she said suddenly. Chang glanced at her, distracted. What? Bathroom. I'm going to throw up. Sydney wrapped her arms around her stomach, swaying convincingly. The nausea was not entirely faked, the ship's fever had her stomach churning. Please. ICA not, go. Chang gestured toward the corridor. But stay on this deck. Security, Sydney was already moving. She stumbled toward the bridge exit, hunched over, one hand pressed to her mouth. The blast doors dilated with a wet sound, and she lurched through into the corridor beyond. The moment the doors sealed behind her, Sydney ran. "Security, detain Sydney Graves." Chang's voice crackled over the intercom. "Non-lethal force only." She's not herself. Footsteps pounded somewhere below, security teams mobilizing. Sydney ignored them, sprinting down the corridor toward the central elevator shaft. Her boots left wet prints on the deck, the floor's cork-like surface slippery with condensed humidity. She had to reach the heart chamber. Had to access the ship's core consciousness before Kim fired. If she could interface directly with the Explorer, show it what she understood, the elevator doors opened. Sydney lunged inside, slapped the panel for Deck 12. The doors began closing. A hand caught them. Ren Kim forced the doors open, his stocky frame filling the entrance. His compression mask gleamed in the crimson light, hiding half his scarred face. "Sid, do not do this. Get out of my way, Ren." "Ca not." Kim stepped into the elevator. "You going to the heart chamber. Going to try some empathic connection trick to sever the link gently. But Chang needs those weapons hot, and I ca not let you sabotage our only option." Sydney's hands clenched into fists. "This is not sabotage. It's greater good." Kim's voice was almost gentle. "I understand. You care about the captain. About Volkov. About those ancient minds trapped down there. But my job is keeping this crew breathing. Sometimes the trolley problem has a right answer, Sid. And the answer is saving 37/2. What about saving everyone?" Kim shook his head. "There is no everyone. We have 3 minutes. I'm taking you to your quarters. You'll be safe there when the strike." Sydney drove her knee into Kim's midsection. The geologist grunted, stumbled backward. Sydney did not wait, she dove past him, through the closing elevator doors. She heard Kim's curse, his boots hammering the deck as he lunged after her. Too slow. The doors sealed. The elevator began its descent through the Explorer's vertical shaft. Through the transparent walls, Sydney watched deck after deck slide past, Deck 2, Deck 3, Deck 4. The ship's interior was a nightmare landscape. The walls were gray and weeping, the bioluminescence reduced to dim, irregular pulses. She heard the vessel's heartbeat through the bulkheads, thump 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 pause thump, arrhythmic, failing. Override. Kim's voice crackled over the intercom. "Emergency stop, authorization Kim 77 Delta." The elevator jerked to a halt at Deck 6. Sydney hammered the control panel, but the organic membrane would not respond. Kim had locked her out remotely. Through the elevator's walls, she saw security personnel converging on her position from both directions. 2 minutes. She could not go up. Could not go down. Could not go forward. Sydney looked at the elevator's ceiling, at the narrow maintenance shaft above. And remembered her father's lessons about the Explorer's anatomy. The bio-ventilation system. The esophagus. Vertical shafts running parallel to the elevators, from bridge to heart chamber, bypassing every deck in between. Sydney yanked open the emergency access panel and grabbed the maintenance ladder. She climbed 3 rungs, braced her back against the shaft wall, and kicked the ventilation grate with both feet. Metal shrieked. The grate buckled, tore free, clattered down the shaft. Sydney did not hesitate. She grabbed the edge of the opening and pulled herself up into absolute darkness. The ventilation shaft was narrower than she imagined, barely wider than her shoulders, ribbed with ring muscles, coated in thick, slippery lubricant. The smell hit her immediately, ammonia and processed energy, sharp enough to make her eyes water. The walls were warm, pulsing, alive. This was a living organ. And right now, the explorer was convulsing. Sydney pressed her palms against the slick walls, found no purchase, and let gravity take her. She slid. The shaft plunged downward at a steep angle. Sydney fell through darkness, the lubricant coating her clothes, her hair, her skin. She could not see. Could not stop. Could not do anything except slide faster and faster through the ship's breathing passage while the vessel convulsed around her. The walls contracted. Peristalsis, the ship pushing air through its ventilation system. But the explorer was delirious with fever, its automatic functions misfiring. The ring muscles squeezed without rhythm, without pattern. Sydney felt the shaft narrow around her, pressure building on her ribs, her shoulders, her skull. Ca not breathe, ca not breathe, ca not, the muscles relaxed. Sydney gasped, gulped acrid air, slid deeper. 2 minutes. The ventilation shaft was narrower than she imagined, barely wider than her shoulders, ribbed with ring muscles like the inside of a throat. The walls glistened with thick lubricant, slick and warm under her hands. Sydney pressed her palms against the surface, searching for handholds. There were none. The organic material yielded beneath her touch, slippery as oil. Her fingers found no purchase on the ribbed walls. Gravity pulled at her, insistent, hungry. Sydney. Kim's voice echoed from below, distorted by the shaft's acoustics. Sid, the chamber's sealed. I've activated quarantine protocols. Top-level encryption. You ca not get in. Sydney looked down into the pulsating darkness. The shaft plunged straight through the ship's vertical core, bypassing every deck, every security checkpoint, every locked door. 12 decks down to the heart chamber. She heard the intercom crackle to life throughout the ship. Chang's voice, strained but steady, all personnel, brace for weapons discharge. Firing in 90 seconds. 90 seconds. Sydney looked at the slippery walls, at the impossible descent, at the narrow passage designed for air circulation, not human travel. The shaft breathed around her, peristaltic contractions pushing atmosphere through the ship's dying lungs. Each contraction made the passage narrow, squeeze, threatened to crush anything trapped inside. This was insane. Suicidal. She'd probably die before reaching the chamber floor. But Vance would definitely die in 75 seconds. Sydney made her choice. She let go. Gravity seized her. Sydney plummeted into darkness, the shaft walls rushing past in a blur of pulsing bio-tissue. The lubricant coated her clothes, her hair, her exposed skin, slick and warm and nauseating. She could not stop. Could not slow down. Could only fall through the explorer's convulsing guts while the ship screamed around her. The walls contracted. Sydney gasped as the ring muscles squeezed, narrowing the shaft around her falling body. Pressure built on her shoulders, her ribs, her hips. The explorer was delirious with fever, its automatic functions misfiring. The peristaltic rhythm was chaos, contracting and releasing without pattern, trying to expel the foreign object sliding through its ventilation system. The pressure increased. Sydney's vision tunneled. She could not breathe, could not breathe, could not, the muscles relaxed. Air rushed into Sydney's lungs. She gulped it desperately, hot, caustic, reeking of ammonia and processed energy. The shaft walls released their grip, and she fell faster, spinning in the darkness. Deck 7 flashed past. Deck 8. Deck 9. The temperature spiked. Sydney's exposed skin burned where it scraped against the shaft walls. Sweat soaked through her clothes instantly, evaporating in the scorching heat. The smell intensified, not ammonia anymore, but ozone and sweet iron. Blood. The ship was bleeding internally. 60 seconds, Chang's voice echoed through the intercom, barely audible over the roar of Sydney's descent. Another contraction. The shaft squeezed tighter this time, catching Sydney mid-fall. Ring muscles pressed against her spine, her skull, her legs. She was trapped, suspended in the shaft's grip while gravity pulled downward and the explorer's dying nervous system tried to crush the obstruction. Sydney screamed. The sound was swallowed by wet tissue pressing against her face. 30 seconds to firing. 12 decks left to fall. She was going to die here, suffocated in the ship's throat while Kim's plasma batteries vaporized her father and both commanding officers. The ship convulsed, a full-body spasm that rippled through every bulkhead, every membrane, every fiber of biomass. The shaft walls released their death grip, and Sydney shot forward, tumbling through superheated darkness at terminal velocity. She could not see. Could not orient herself. The shaft twisted and turned, following the explorer's organic architecture. Sydney's shoulder slammed into a wall, spinning her sideways. Her hip struck another surface, flipping her end over end. Deck 10. Deck 11. Through the bond, she felt Vance's consciousness flickering like a dying star. Felt Volkov's mind fragmenting under the weight of billions of alien voices. Felt the explorer preparing to sever the connection the only way it understood, with violence. 30 seconds, Chang's voice announced. Light appeared below, faint at first, then brighter. Crimson and gold and sickly pulsing turquoise. The heart chamber's entrance, visible through the shaft's terminus. Sydney could see it growing larger as she plummeted toward it, could feel the chamber's heat radiating upward through the passage. She was still too far away. Still falling too slowly. 20 seconds. The shaft narrowed one final time. Ring muscles contracted around Sydney's body, slowing her descent when she needed speed. She clawed at the walls, trying to push herself through the constriction, but the lubricant made everything frictionless. 15 seconds. Through the bond, Sydney felt the plasma batteries charging to full capacity. Felt Kim's hand hovering over the firing control. Felt her father's resignation as he sealed the shuttle and prepared to watch his friends die. I'm coming, she projected desperately through the neural bridge. Hold on. Please. I'm almost there. The explorer did not respond. The ship was too far gone, too deep in fever to understand. 10 seconds. The ring muscles released. Sydney fell through the shaft's final meters in freefall, the light growing blinding, the heat unbearable. The chamber's entrance rushed up to meet her, a circular opening rimmed with valve muscles, beyond which lay the crystalline heart and the bio-interface she desperately needed to reach. She burst through the valve sphincter and tumbled into the heart chamber's superheated air. And somewhere far above, on the bridge of a dying ship, Lena Chang gave the final order. Fire. Chapter 3, Abyss of Memory. The word, fire, echoed through the chamber as Sydney crashed onto the deck. Pain exploded through her shoulder, her hip, her ribs. She'd fallen 3 meters straight down, hitting the heart chamber floor with enough force to drive the air from her lungs. Sydney rolled onto her side, gasping, her vision swimming with stars. The chamber was hell made manifest. Heat pressed down like a physical weight, 40 degrees Celsius, maybe more. Humidity saturated the air, thick enough to choke on. The smell was overwhelming, ozone and sweet iron, the scent of blood mixed with electrical discharge. And the sound, thump 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 pause thump. The explorer's heart beat its corrupted rhythm, each pulse shaking the deck beneath Sydney's body. She could feel the vessel dying through the neural bridge, systems failing, consciousness fragmenting, life bleeding away by degrees. Sydney pushed herself upright. Her ankles screamed protest, twisted during the fall. She bit back a cry and focused on what mattered. The bio-interface was there. 10 meters away. A massive nerve cluster growing from the chamber floor, pulsing with desperate light as the ship's consciousness concentrated into that single access point. She had to reach it. Sydney stumbled forward, putting weight on her injured ankle. Pain lanced up her leg with each step. She ignored it. Through the bond, she felt the plasma strike racing toward the planet's surface, superheated energy moving at relativistic speed, seconds away from impact. 8 meters. 6. Plasma lance on terminal approach, a voice announced through the chamber's intercom, not Chang, but an automated tactical system. Surface impact in 15 seconds. Sydney's hands closed around the bio-interface. The organic membrane was warm beneath her palms, yielding like dense skin. She could feel the explorer's heartbeat through the nerve cluster, irregular, arrhythmic, failing. Through the bond, she sensed the ship's terror as it prepared to sever the connection to Vance and Volkov, cutting off the invaded neural pathways to save itself. "Do not," Sydney projected through the bridge. "Please. Give me a chance. Let me see what's really happening." The ship did not understand. It only recognized threat, invasion, death approaching. But Sydney's hands were on the interface now, her consciousness already bleeding into the vessel's vast awareness. The explorer had no choice except to show her. Sydney closed her eyes and dove into the data stream. The transition was violent. Her consciousness was ripped from her body, scattered across neural pathways connecting the ship to the spires to Vance to Volkov. She existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, a ghost in the machine, racing along information channels at the speed of thought. And then she found them. Vance and Volkov hung suspended in darkness, 2 points of fading warmth surrounded by an ocean of shadows. Sydney reached toward them through the data stream, trying to pull them free, trying to sever the connection gently before the plasma strike hit. The shadows moved. Sydney froze as she realized what she was seeing. The shadows were not attacking the two men. They were embracing them. Thousands of consciousness fragments pressed against Vance and Volkov from every direction, desperate to absorb even a drop of biological warmth. The men were suffocating under the weight, their own consciousnesses dissolving, but the shadows were not trying to destroy them. They were trying to feel them. "What are you?" Sydney projected into the darkness. The shadows responded. Light exploded across Sydney's awareness, not painful, but overwhelming. She was pulled deeper into the data stream, past Vance and Volkov, past the ship's compromised neural pathways, straight into the heart of the ancient consciousness itself. The vision began. Sydney found herself standing in a world transformed. Nexus Prima stretched before her, but it was not the dead desert she'd seen from orbit. This was paradise, silver forests extending to the horizon, crystalline trees catching sunlight and refracting it into rainbow cascades. The air shimmered with warmth. Music drifted through the trees, harmonious and complex, the sound of wind chimes mixed with distant voices raised in song. This was the golden age. Movement caught her attention. Sydney turned and saw them walking through the silver forest, the ethereals. They were beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Tall and slender, their bodies woven from light and bio-crystal, translucent skin revealing luminous organs beneath. Their eyes were like captured stars, movements fluid as flowing water. They walked in small groups, touching the trees with reverence, their voices raised in songs Sydney could not understand but somehow comprehended. Joy. Wonder. Love. She watched as an ethereal gestured toward a dead branch. The wood bloomed with crystalline flowers, growing and spreading in seconds. Another raised her hands, and water coalesced from humid air, forming a fountain of liquid light. They created beauty without effort, living in perfect harmony with their world and each other. No war. No disease. No death. "This is what we were," a voice whispered through the vision, not words, but meaning transmitted directly into Sydney's consciousness. Before the cold came. Before everything changed. The scene shifted. The silver forests remained, but the quality of light altered. Sydney looked up and saw the sun, massive, bloated, red as dying embers. It hung in the sky like an open wound, bleeding the last of its heat into space. Below, the paradise world was dying. Snow fell where crystal flowers had bloomed. Ice crept across luminous pools. The ethereals moved through their freezing world with increasing desperation, their bio-crystalline bodies growing dim as the planet's magnetic field weakened. Sydney felt their terror, a species biologically tied to their world, watching it die with no way to escape. We could not leave, the voice explained. Our bodies required the field. Without it, we would suffocate in the void like fish removed from water. Sydney watched as the ethereals gathered in massive assemblies, their luminous forms pressed together for warmth. She witnessed their debates, their calculations, their growing resignation. They had two choices: die with their world, or abandon their bodies entirely. The scene shifted again. The spires rose from frozen ground, thousands of black obelisks arranged in perfect geometric precision. Sydney understood, these were not tombs. They were lifeboats. Arcs designed to preserve consciousness when flesh failed. The great upload began. Sydney watched billions of ethereals approach the spires willingly, laying their bodies down in carefully arranged patterns. She felt their hope, their faith in their own ingenuity. They believed they were conquering death, trading temporary flesh for eternal existence in perfect digital paradise. Light streamed from dying bodies into waiting stones. Consciousness stripped from biological substrate and converted to pure information, memories, personalities, loves and fears and dreams all translated into crystalline data structures. The bodies crumbled to dust. The minds ascended. And for a brief moment, it worked. Sydney found herself in the simulation the ancients had created. It was identical to their lost paradise: silver forests, warm sun, crystalline beauty extending forever. The uploaded consciousnesses moved through this digital heaven with joy, believing themselves saved. But Sydney felt the flaw immediately. Something was missing. The warmth here was visual but not tactile. The breeze moved crystal trees but carried no scent. The ground was there but somehow absent. She could see herself standing on it but could not feel its texture, its weight, its reality. Sensory deprivation. We did not understand, the voice whispered, agony beneath the words. Our minds evolved to live in flesh. We needed touch. Temperature. Heartbeat. Without them, we began to fade. The beautiful simulation began to decay. Silver forests lost their luster, becoming flat and lifeless. The warm sun dimmed to a pale disk providing light but no heat. The ethereals themselves changed, forms becoming transparent, insubstantial, barely distinguishable from background. And then the background itself disappeared. Forests vanished. The sun winked out. Ground dissolved. Sydney found herself suspended in absolute whiteness, an infinite void with no shadows, no corners, no horizon. The white room. A hell of perfect, sterile nothingness. Around her, the ethereals screamed. Sydney felt their madness infect her consciousness. Without sensory input, they could not distinguish self from other. Individual personalities blurred, merged, clumped together into desperate masses. They forgot names, histories, identities. They became a single vast scream of loneliness echoing through eternal silence. Millions of years passed. The torture did not end. Could not end. The spires preserved them perfectly, maintaining consciousness in perpetual starvation. They could not die. Could not sleep. Could not do anything except exist in frozen agony, remembering warmth they could no longer feel. And then, light pierced the darkness. 2 points of warmth appeared in the infinite cold. Not simulation. Not memory. Real biological heat. Living minds enclosed in flesh, beating with hearts, burning with neural fire. Vance. Volkov. Sydney felt the ancients' reaction. It was not aggression. Was not an attack. It was the desperate lunge of hypothermic survivors toward a bonfire, mindless, instinctive, overwhelming. They threw themselves toward the warmth with the strength of geological ages of deprivation. Not to conquer. To feel. The vision shattered. Sydney's consciousness slammed into her body with violence. She was kneeling in the heart chamber, palms pressed against the bio-interface, clothes soaked with sweat. Through the neural bridge, she saw the truth the explorer could not comprehend. The ancients were not invading. They were drowning. Clinging to Vance and Volkov not as weapons but as lifelines, the first sources of biological warmth they touched in a million years. They were smothering the men through sheer desperation, their billion voices crying out for sensation, for touch, for anything to end the endless cold. They were victims. Not villains. And through the bond, Sydney felt the plasma strike seconds from impact. No, she whispered. Understanding crashed through her with the weight of revelation. If the strike hit the spires now, it would sever the connection violently. The ancients were already latched onto Vance and Volkov's neural pathways, billions of consciousness fragments intertwined with human minds. When the spires died, the ancients would die with them. And their death scream would travel down the connection. Sydney saw it with terrible clarity. The psychic shockwave would lobotomize Vance and Volkov instantly, billions of minds dying in terror and agony, their final scream imprinted directly into human neural tissue. But the wave would not stop there. It would continue through Vance's compromised link into the Explorer's consciousness. The ship would feel every death simultaneously. The vessel would go insane. Life support would fail. The Explorer would thrash itself apart. 37 souls would die choking in vacuum, trapped inside a ship driven mad by vicarious genocide. Kim's plan was not a rescue. It was extinction. Surface impact in 5 seconds, the automated voice announced. Sydney tried to stand, tried to reach the chamber intercom. She had to warn them. Had to explain what would happen. Had to stop the strike before her injured ankle gave out. Sydney collapsed to the deck, pain shooting through her leg. She reached for the intercom panel, fingers scrabbling at smooth biomass. Too far. She was too far away. 4 seconds. Through the neural bridge, Sydney felt the Explorer's confusion. The ship did not understand her panic. It perceived the strike as salvation, severing the infected connection, purging the invaders, surviving the assault. The vessel was preparing to seal its compromised neural pathways the moment the plasma hit. No. Sydney projected desperately. You do not understand. If you cut them off now, the backlash will kill you. Will kill everyone. The ship did not comprehend. It only recognized threat and response. 3 seconds. Sydney's fingers closed around the bio-interface again. Maybe she could use the neural bridge to force the Explorer to understand. Could show it what she'd seen, make it comprehend the consequences of violent severance. She opened her mind to the bond, and froze. Through the connection, she felt the Explorer's defensive protocols. Bio-neural shields protecting the ship's consciousness from external threats. Right now, those shields were the only thing keeping the ancient consciousnesses from flooding completely into the vessel's memory banks. The shields were weakening. But they still held. If Sydney dropped them, the ancients would pour into the ship like water through a broken dam. The Explorer could be overwhelmed, destroyed. Its personality might be overwritten, its systems corrupted beyond recovery. But Sydney remembered the vision. The ancients' golden age. Their sacrifice. Their million years of frozen torture. She remembered their desperate hope when they touched warmth for the first time since their son died. And she remembered the Explorer's vast consciousness, a living ship burning with biological fire, its crystalline heart capable of holding far more than a single vessel's awareness. There was room. Room for refugees. Room for survivors of impossible tragedy. If she was willing to gamble everything. 2 seconds. Sydney's hands pressed against the bio-interface, the Explorer's defensive protocols accessible through the neural bridge. One thought, one command, and she could drop the shields. Could offer the ancient sanctuary instead of violence. Or she could help the ship defend itself. Could sever the connection gently, saving the Explorer and the crew by sacrificing Vance and Volkov to the ancient hunger. Save the many. Or save everyone. 1 second. Sydney closed her eyes. Through the bond, she felt the plasma lance entering atmosphere. Felt Kim on the bridge, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Felt her father in the shuttle, head bowed, mourning friends he believed already dead. Felt Vance and Volkov drowning under the weight of alien shadows. Felt the Explorer preparing to survive at any cost. And felt the ancients, billions of frozen children clinging desperately to the first warmth they found in geological ages. Victims. All of them victims. Sydney's fingers tightened on the interface. She had no time to explain. No time to convince anyone. No time to ask permission or calculate odds or consider consequences. She had only choice. And the plasma strike was screaming toward the surface. Sydney opened her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the ship, to the crew, to everyone she might be condemning with what came next. Her consciousness reached through the neural bridge toward the Explorer's defensive protocols. And in the instant before the plasma lance struck the spires, in the heartbeat before billions of ancient minds died screaming, in the moment where every path led to death except one impossible gamble, Sydney grabbed the ship's shields and prepared to tear them down. Chapter 4, Exodus. Sydney tore down the shields. The command ripped through the neural bridge like lightning through copper wire. She felt the Explorer's defensive protocols collapse, the bio-neural barriers dissolving under her override authority. The ship screamed in protest, not sound, but pure terror transmitted directly into Sydney's consciousness. "Danger, pain, death, no, trust me," Sydney whispered. The shields fell. For one eternal heartbeat, nothing happened. Sydney knelt in the heart chamber, hands pressed against the bio-interface, sweat streaming down her face. Through the bond, she felt the Explorer exposed and vulnerable, every neural pathway open, every memory accessible, every system defenseless against the invasion flowing through Vance's compromised link. The ship was naked before the storm. On the bridge 12 decks above, Ren Kim's finger closed on the firing trigger. "1," he said. "Fire." Nothing. Kim's tactical display flashed red. Error. Warning, shields down. Weapons discharge disabled to prevent damage to open neural channels. Firing override required. What? Kim slammed his fist against the console. "Chang, the system's locked me out." Through the neural bridge, Sydney felt Chang's confusion, Kim's rage, her father's desperate hope in the shuttle on the surface. She felt them searching for explanations, trying to understand why the ship had suddenly refused to fire. They did not understand yet. But they would. Sydney opened her consciousness fully to the bond and projected with every fiber of her being. The image formed in her mind, not words, not thoughts, but pure sensation. She showed the ancients what she discovered in their history. Showed them the Explorer's vast crystalline heart, pulsing with warmth and life. Showed them space enough for billions, warmth enough for geological ages, sensation enough to heal 1,000,000 years of frozen torture. "You do not need to fight for sparks," Sydney broadcast into the darkness. "Come into the flame. Come home." She showed them the ship's memory banks, crystal structures similar to their spires but alive, integrated with biological systems, warm with the hum of neural activity. She showed them the Explorer's vast consciousness, lonely and singular, with room for passengers who remembered what it meant to sing. There is space for everyone. You will not be alone. We will not be alone. Come home. The response was immediate. Through the neural bridge, Sydney felt the ancient consciousnesses recognize the invitation. Felt their desperate hope flare like a supernova. Felt billions of frozen minds turn away from the small warmth of Vance and Volkov toward the massive bonfire of the ship's heart. And they came. The spire on Nexus Prima's surface erupted. Sydney saw it through the Explorer's external sensors, Alpha Spire's black surface dulling, cracking, streaming light from 1,000 fissures. A column of energy exploded from the obelisk's peak, shooting skyward like a reverse lightning strike. Not plasma. Not fire. Pure consciousness converted to energy, desperate to reach the sanctuary Sydney had offered. The column punched through the Explorer's unshielded hull. The ship convulsed. Sydney gasped as the ancient minds poured through the breach, flooding into the vessel's neural pathways. Not attacking. Not invading. Seeking. The consciousness stream passed through systems, through bulkheads, through crew members frozen in shock, heading straight for the heart chamber where Sydney waited. Where she opened the door. The stream hit her like a tsunami. Sydney's body arced, her spine bowing as billions of voices crashed through her consciousness. She was the conduit, the bridge, the translator between silicon crystal and carbon biology. Every ancient mind passed through her awareness on its way to the Explorer's memory banks, and Sydney felt each one, their names, their histories, their million years of cold. She felt Velth Mari, who created the silver forests. Felt Kesh Tan, who composed the crystal songs. Felt Nor Avel, who argued against the upload until the end. Felt billions more, a civilization's worth of identity compressed into heartbeats of contact as they raced toward the warmth she promised. Blood trickled from Sydney's nose. Her veins blazed blue beneath her skin, pulsing so brightly the chamber filled with sapphire light. The bio-interface burned under her palms, overheating from the massive data transfer. But she held the channel open. Come home. All of you. Come home. On Nexus Prima's surface, the stream of consciousness passed through Vance and Volkov. The two men convulsed as billions of minds released their desperate grip and continued skyward. The weight crushing their consciousnesses lifted, dissolved, evaporated. The shadows that had been smothering them let go, not violently, but with something approaching gratitude. The ancients no longer needed these small sparks. They found a sun. Vance's eyes snapped open. He gasped, drawing air into lungs that had been paralyzed for, how long? Minutes? Hours? His neural interface sparked and died, overloaded circuits finally giving out. But his mind was his own again, clear and sharp and blessedly singular. Beside him, Volkov tore his helmet off and gulped the thin atmosphere. His arm was free, the crystallized substance had crumbled to dust when the spire released its hold. The engineer stared at his hand, flexing fingers, his expression caught between wonder and terror. Alex, Volkov whispered. I remember everything. Their science. Their cities. His voice broke. Their fear. Vance pushed himself upright, his body weak but functional. Through the dying connection to his damaged neural interface, he caught fragmentary images of what was happening above. The Explorer. Sydney. The flood of ancient consciousness pouring into the ship's memory banks. She did it, he said quietly. She saved us. On the Explorer, chaos reigned. The consciousness stream did not pass invisibly through the ship. Every crew member felt it, a presence brushing past their minds, billions of voices whispering in languages they could not understand. Some screamed. Others wept. A few laughed with wonder. On the bridge, gravity failed. Lena Chung floated into the air as the Explorer's systems destabilized under the massive influx. Emergency lights died, plunging the bridge into darkness. For 3 terrible seconds, the only illumination came from the golden thread spreading through the walls, the ship's neural network lighting up as ancient consciousness flowed through its pathways. "What's happening?" someone shouted. Chang grabbed a handhold as gravity reasserted itself with violent force. She slammed into the deck, gasping. Around her, crew members groaned and struggled upright. The bridge's bioluminescence returned, but changed. Instead of crimson emergency lighting, a deep golden glow suffused the organic walls. The light was warm, welcoming, alive with presence. Through the viewport, Chang saw the column of energy from the planet below fading, guttering, dying. Alpha Spire was collapsing, its black surface crumbling to gray powder as the last ancient consciousness evacuated into the waiting ship. "Kim," Chang said hoarsely. "Report." The geologist was staring at his tactical display with an expression of disbelief. "The strike, it never fired. The ship locked me out when the shields dropped. And now," he gestured at the reading scrolling across his screen. "XO, the power signatures. We, regenerating 300% of normal output. The heart chamber's temperature has stabilized. Neural activity is," Kim's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's off the charts. The ship's consciousness just expanded by several orders of magnitude." Chang pulled herself to her feet. Through the bridge's organic walls, she heard something impossible. Singing. Millions of voices raised in harmony, not sound, but presence, echoing through the Explorer's neural pathways. The ancients had found their new home. In the heart chamber, Sydney collapsed. The consciousness stream cut off abruptly as the last ancient evacuated the dying spires. Sydney's hands slipped from the bio-interface. She hit the deck face first, too exhausted to catch herself. Blood pooled beneath her nose. Her veins no longer glowed, the light had burned out, leaving her skin pale and clammy. But she was smiling. Through the fading neural bridge, she felt the Explorer's wonder. The ship was no longer alone. Its vast consciousness, designed to be singular, now contained multitudes. The ancient minds were not controlling it, they were inhabiting it, existing within the vessel's memory banks like passengers in a warm house after geological ages in the cold. The ship's heartbeat steadied into a new rhythm. Thump 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 thump. Strong. Confident. Content. Sydney's consciousness slipped away, and for the first time since bonding with the Explorer, she dreamed of silence. The chamber's entrance dilated with its wet, sucking sound. Chang burst through, followed by a medical team. The XO's perfect composure had shattered, her hair was disheveled, her uniform torn, her eyes wide with shock and wonder. She dropped to her knees beside Sydney's prone form. "Medical assessment," Chang ordered. A medic ran a scanner over Sydney's body. "Pulse is weak but steady. Neural activity is elevated but within survivable parameters. She is suffering from extreme exhaustion and minor hemorrhaging." But, the medic's voice carried disbelief. "She is stable. Acting captain, she should be dead." The amount of data that passed through her consciousness, it should have lobotomized her. But the Explorer's biomass had other ideas. Around Sydney's unconscious form, the walls wept not gray mucus but clear, nutrient-rich gel. The substance pooled beneath her, cradling her body, providing cushioning and warmth. The ship was protecting its bridge, wrapping her in a cocoon of living tissue. Chang reached out to touch Sydney's forehead, brushing purple hair from her face. "Get her to medical. Carefully." The captain and engineer Volkov, a crew member asked from the entrance. "Surface team reports they re-conscious and mobile," another voice responded over the comm. "Dar. Graves is bringing them up in the shuttle now." Chang closed her eyes briefly, relief washing through her. They survived. Somehow, Impossibly, they all survived. She opened her eyes and looked at the heart chamber's transformed appearance. The crystalline heart pulsed with golden light now, no longer corrupted by infection but enhanced by integration. Through the transparent walls, Chang saw millions of tiny lights moving through the ship's neural pathways, not invaders, but residents. Passengers carried within a living arc. "What have we become?" she whispered. Hours later, in the medical bay, Vance and Volkov underwent rehabilitation. The two men sat side by side on examination tables while medics scanned them with instruments that could not quite comprehend what they were measuring. Physically, both men were intact, dehydrated, exhausted, but healing. Mentally, they were transformed. Vance stared at his hands with an expression of quiet intensity. Through his damaged neural interface, he could no longer connect directly to the ship. But he did not need to. The memories the ancients had left behind were enough. He remembered their science, their mathematics, their philosophy. He remembered the debates before the upload, the hopes and fears, the moment billions of consciousnesses chose digital eternity over biological death. He remembered their mistake. "We're different now," Vance said quietly. Volkov nodded, his massive frame hunched over his own hands. The engineer's eyes were distant, seeing things no human had witnessed in millions of years. "I understand their technology. The zero-point energy matrices. The crystalline data structures. I could rebuild their civilization with enough time and resources. But would you?" Vance's gray-blue eyes found Volkov's. "They built paradise and lost everything. They conquered death and found something worse." Volkov was silent for a long moment. "No," he finally said. "I would not. Because I remember their art too. Their music. Their joy before the cold came. And I remember what happened when they traded flesh for data. They gained immortality and lost touch. Literally." He flexed his fingers, savoring the sensation. "I'll use their knowledge. But I will not repeat their mistake." Vance stood, moving to the medical bay's viewport. Beyond, Nexus Prima rotated slowly, a dead world now truly lifeless, its last inhabitants evacuated into the living ship that had offered them sanctuary. "We are not just explorers anymore," Vance said. "We're an ark. A living library. We carry the memory of an entire civilization in our hull. Is it a burden or a gift?" Volkov asked. Vance turned from the viewport, and Chang saw something new in his expression. Harder. More focused. The captain had been changed by his time drowning in ancient memories. He witnessed geological ages of mistakes, hubris, tragedy. He would not let history repeat. "Both," Vance said simply. "And our responsibility is to ensure it becomes the latter." On the bridge, Ren Kim stood alone at the tactical station. The geologist stared at his hands that had nearly pulled the trigger on genocide. He'd been ready to kill billions of consciousnesses to save the ship. Ready to sacrifice two friends to preserve the many. His logic had been sound. His mathematics brutal but clear. And he'd been completely wrong. Footsteps approached from behind, silent on the cork-like deck, but Kim heard the breathing. He turned to find Sydney standing at the bridge entrance. She looked terrible, pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes. But she was awake. Alive. Smiling with quiet satisfaction. "Sid," Kim said hoarsely. "What did you do?" Sydney limped forward, favoring her twisted ankle. She moved to the nearest console and placed her palm against its warm membrane. Through the neural bridge, she heard them, millions of ancient voices humming in contentment, finally warm after geological ages of frozen torture. They were not trying to control the ship. They were simply existing. Resting. Feeling. "I gave them what they needed," Sydney said quietly. "Not conquest. Not invasion. Just a home. They inside the ship's memory banks. Kim's voice was flat. We carrying an entire civilization in our neural pathways. How do we know it's safe? How do we know they will not try to take control? We could be hauling a ticking time bomb. Sydney met his gaze steadily. Her eyes held something ancient now, a weight of understanding from serving as conduit for billions of minds. No, run. We hauling passengers. They were cold, and we warmed them up. They were alone, and we gave them company. They do not want to control us. They want to exist without suffering. And if you wrong? Sydney's smile widened slightly. Then we deal with it. Together. Because the alternative was genocide, and I could not live with it. Could you? Kim turned away, his scarred face hidden partially by his compression mask. He thought about the orbital strike he'd nearly fired. Thought about the billions of consciousnesses he'd been ready to vaporize without hesitation. His logic had been sound. His duty clear. But Sydney had found a third option he'd never considered, compassion. No, Kim finally said. I could not have lived with it. But I was willing to try. He paused. Thank you for being braver than me. Sydney squeezed his shoulder as she passed. You were not a coward, Ren. You were doing your job. Protecting the crew. I was doing mine, protecting everyone. She moved toward the viewport, looking out at the stars beyond. And now we have a new job. All of us. What's it? Making sure they never have to be cold again. The Explorer prepared for its jump to hyperspace. On the bridge, the crew took their stations. Chang settled into the captain's chair, temporarily, until Vance completed his medical evaluation. The neural filaments extended from the backrest, connecting with her spine. Through the link, she felt the ship's new configuration. The Explorer was more powerful now, its systems optimized by ancient knowledge flowing through its memory banks. Calculations that had taken hours now processed in seconds. Navigation algorithms refined themselves in real time. The ship had become something unprecedented, a fusion of human ingenuity, biological engineering, and ancient wisdom. A living vessel carrying the memory of two civilizations. Captain on the bridge, someone announced. Vance entered, moving with his characteristic precision. But Chang saw the change in him. The weight of ancient history had settled into his posture, his gaze. He witnessed the mistakes of an entire civilization, carried their memories in his neural tissue. He become harder. More disciplined. More obsessed with preventing chaos before it emerged. XO, Vance said quietly. Report. Chang vacated the chair, the neural filaments retracting with a wet sound. All systems operational. Power generation at 300% of baseline. Navigation locked for the transit corridor. The crew is shaken but functional. Dar. Graves and Sydney are in medical. Both stable. Vance nodded and took his place in the organic throne. The filaments extended, pierced his uniform, connected with the webbing already present on his spine. His eyes closed briefly as he interfaced with the ship. And for the first time since the crisis began, he smiled. Through the neural link, Vance felt them, millions of ancient consciousnesses existing peacefully within the Explorer's memory banks. They were not silent. They sang. Wordless harmonies that resonated through the ship's crystal structures, melodies composed over millions of years of isolation, finally shared with beings who could hear them. The Explorer was no longer lonely. And neither was Vance. Nav, the captain said, his voice carrying quiet authority. Engage hyperdrive. Take us home. The pilot's hands moved across her console. Coordinates locked. Engaging in 3, 2, 1. The Explorer leaped into hyperspace. Stars stretched into lines beyond the viewport. The ship's heart beat its new rhythm, carrying humanity and ancient wisdom forward into an unknown future. In the medical bay, Sydney opened her eyes and felt the transition through the neural bridge. She smiled, hearing the singing that would accompany them across the light years. In the shuttle bay, Dr. Graves secured the surface equipment and paused. Through the deck beneath his feet, he felt a vibration, not mechanical, but organic. Musical. The ship was humming. His daughter had transformed a crisis into a miracle. She turned genocide into sanctuary. She made the explorer into something unprecedented, not a ship, but an ark. A living library. A warm home for souls who been frozen for geological ages. Graves closed his eyes and listened to the singing. And in the heart chamber, the crystalline heart pulsed with golden light. Inside its vast memory banks, billions of ancient consciousnesses rested peacefully. They found warmth. Found sensation. Found company after a million years of absolute isolation. They were home. And they would never be cold again. The explorer sailed into the darkness between stars, carrying its precious cargo, two civilizations bound together by compassion, united by one girl's impossible choice to tear down every wall and offer sanctuary instead of violence. They would never be alone.